America's workforce. Its strength is our nation's success. Join Ronnie Spellman on I Build America podcast as we explore innovative solutions and inspiring stories from leaders and workers shaping America. Discover actionable insights to build a motivated workforce.
I build America.
Welcome to the program. I have Laura Fautsch with us. Laura, welcome.
Thank you.
So as you know, this program is really focused on workforce development and how do we continue to evolve, improve, grow, and change, and make sure we have a workforce of the future when it comes to the United States. I know when I look at a lot of the Department of Labor numbers, it shows that we have shortages in a lot of areas, from a job need and a career need to different industry needs. And so we have a lot of work to do to make sure that our workforce is prepared. You have technology changing, you have AI that's impacting the opportunities that are available, and we're trying to find ways to keep up from a national perspective. But you're a vice president organization in the workforce development. Tell me about what you've done.
Okay, so I currently serve as the vice president of operations for Serrato Corporation. And I oversee the operation of Job Corps centers. So Serrato Corporation runs and operates 6 Job Corps centers. And the majority of the time, I spend a lot of time training the people at the Job Corps centers, and I also help with curriculum development and things like that.
Oh, wow.
In the past, I've been a center director at a Job Corps center, actually 2 Job Corps centers, and prior to that, I worked for the Department of Labor.
Okay. So your curriculum development, walk us through what that looks like. So you're right at the center of everything relative to workforce development. We'll get to the Department of Labor separately, but the curriculum development piece is so important because you're probably the one charged with making sure that the programs fit what's needed out in the workspace within the private sector. But walk me through, if you don't mind, what did that look like?
Well, I think one of the things that, frankly, Job Corps has struggled with is keeping up with the current things that are happening.
All education does.
In education.
College is the same way.
Yes. Yeah. So I know that there are a lot of ways that the students at our Job Corps centers learn that maybe are not as traditional as perhaps when we went to school.
Sure.
So one of the things that we focus on is we have a lot of meetings with our instructors and get feedback from them, but we also work with our students to see what works with them and what doesn't work with them in terms of working in the classroom. So we do AI, we do a lot of learning online now, and in the past we didn't do things like that.
Interesting.
So we do a lot more of that now than we used to.
So what are young people learning in the Job Corps facilities? So I know that the program accepts 16 to 24. It's a great opportunity for those families that are looking to send their kids to a place where they can get training. They live on campus. They have a dorm just like I had in college. They have a cafeteria where they're fed at no additional charge to them. So it's a great deal.
It is.
Completely free.
Yes.
But why do they go there to learn, and why is what they're learning important, particularly given your curriculum development experience?
So we offer high school diploma and GED at all of our Job Corps centers. Some of the students do come in with that already, though, so they don't necessarily need to do that while they're enrolled. And we also offer several certification programs. Now we call it career technical training. People might recognize it as vocational training.
That's what it was when I was in school. Yes.
Me too. So I always like to say that because sometimes people might think it's something different.
Don't lose your thought on that. That career and technical piece is just so important. And I spent a lot of time talking about vocational, career and technical, because I think even though the vast majority of people in this country do not go to traditional four-year college, there's kind of this dismissiveness about that career and technical education side. I took a shop class when I was in high school, and I loved it. I also took a home ec class, which was fantastic. But I think we were required to take some of those courses.
Yes.
And they were so beneficial to me.
I had to take a woodworking class. I also had to do home ec. I think we all probably had to do home ec back then. I also had to take a drafting class.
I did as well, yes.
And it sort of made me, the woodworking in particular, I was interested in. But back then, women didn't go into the trades. And in the family that I grew up in, there was no question that I would be going to college. So that wasn't really something that I explored. But now I believe that the pendulum has swung back the other way, where we went through everybody needs to go to college, right? But now we're back to perhaps the career technical training and vocational training being more accepted, or however you want to frame it. And so I think we see a lot more people interested in it now.
You're the expert in this arena, but it seems to me that a lot of the white-collar jobs are easy to export offshore. And I worked in home building. You can't build a home here in the U.S. from another country.
Correct.
It just doesn't work. You can't do plumbing or HVAC remotely. There's no teleprogram, right? That you can bring a camera and look and fix a pipe in it. So these, in my opinion, I think these trades are so important and valuable.
Are, definitely. And I think because we offer a lot of different types of training, it allows the students coming in to have different options when they enroll. So we offer different programs at the same center.
Okay.
So, for example, a very common program that's offered at a lot of our centers is CNA, Certified Nurse Assistant. We also offer, for example, bricklaying or carpentry or painting.
Okay.
Dental assistant is another one. So there's a variety.
Bricklaying feels like a lost art. That is fantastic.
Yes.
I know that when I worked in home building, it was hard finding certain people. It was hard finding roofers, and it was hard finding even people that understood how to apply stucco.
Yes.
Even drywall was really hard.
Absolutely. One of the nice things is when I started in Job Corps a very long time ago, in 1997, there were not a lot of female students in those what they used to call non-traditional trades like bricklaying, carpentry, painting.
Right.
And what was discovered over time, and thankfully now there are a lot more female students in those trades, is that we as females actually did just as well and a lot of times better than the male students because we had more attention to detail.
Oh, interesting.
If I could stereotype.
So, it's fascinating. I didn't have that as one of my questions on the list, like that I would ask, but that's a really fascinating point when you look at the demographics of our student makeup and the trades programs.
Yes.
So there are a lot of females coming through now seeking those trade opportunities.
And even in some cases having a female instructor. So when I was at the Chicago Job Corps Center, I had a female bricklaying instructor.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was pretty awesome.
That is cool.
And a lot of the female students said, "Oh, look at her. She's doing that. I can do that too."
Wow.
Right? So
that's really impactful.
Great.
So I suspect, though, you didn't go to college and then wake up as a vice president of operations.
No, I did not.
Walk us through what that looked like. So you grew up where and where'd you go to high school?
I'm originally from Dubuque, Iowa.
Okay.
I went to Wahlert Catholic High School.
Very nice.
And I stayed in town to go to college.
Okay.
I wasn't really sure exactly what I wanted to do, so I stayed in town. I lived on campus, though, and I went to Clark College. It's now Clark University.
Yeah, great place.
Yeah, it really is. It's a great school, and back then it was a lot smaller than it is now. And I originally enrolled to be a music teacher.
Okay.
And I also thought I was interested in music therapy, but back then that really wasn't incredibly lucrative, or it was kind of in its infancy stages back then, and it wasn't incredibly common. So as I went through school and started to go to classes and things like that, I realized that I was actually good at languages.
Oh,
and
interesting.
so I switched my major from education and finished with a music and Spanish degree.
How did you figure out you were good
degree.
in languages?
I started tutoring people that came in from out of the country, Colombia and Mexico, as sort of a side hustle so that I could make some extra money when I was in school.
Sure.
And I realized I had a knack for it. And so I took some classes and I thought, gee, this is really...
So what's interesting? I think there's a link between music and languages.
Absolutely.
Right? That ability to hear and to be able to make that translation.
I agree with that.
Very interesting.
Wholeheartedly.
And then what was the plan at that point with those?
So when I finished college, my mom is originally from Joliet, Illinois. So I went to Chicago when I was very young, maybe 8, 9 years old. The moment I stepped foot in downtown Chicago, I knew that's where I wanted to be. So even though I grew up in Iowa and went through college in Iowa, as soon as I was finished with school, I went to Chicago. And I, between Iowa and Chicago, though, I lived in Mexico City for 6 months. And then I came back to Chicago and went to graduate school at the University of Illinois at Chicago.
And then finished?
And finished with a master's degree in Latin American literature.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What a transition, though, from undergrad and your original plan. At that point, though, you weren't still planning to be an educator. You were.
So I still had an interest in education. So I was always on the side doing tutoring and classes and things like that. So I still had the interest. And when I was enrolled, getting my master's degree, I had to teach Spanish 101 and 102. It was one of the things I was assigned.
Fantastic.
And because it was a commuter school in the University of Illinois, it was a lot of students from the city. At the time, had I known about Job Corps, I would have had a lot of students to send them because there were a lot of people enrolled in college that really weren't able to make it because they weren't ready.
Sure.
And then when I finished my master's degree, I ran a citizenship and ESL program on the north side of Chicago.
Right.
And we never had to do any advertising or marketing. We always had a full program.
Oh, gosh.
And we taught English and then taught them the government material so that they could pass the citizenship test.
Very cool. Now, for those college students that you mentioned were not ready, what made them not ready?
So it hadn't occurred to me, because I didn't grow up in Chicago, that the problem that they were having in my Spanish class was really they didn't have good English skills.
Okay.
And so when they would come to my office to work with me to pass the class, right, and I would tell them, as long as you come work with me, you'll pass the class.
Right.
And I would have them write out in English what they wanted to talk to me about. And I realized that they could not write sentences in English, but they had their high school diploma.
Right. Gotcha.
Yeah.
So that was kind of their barrier. That language barrier is what kept them from learning. And
absolutely.
Now, it's interesting because I've spoken to a lot of people, and I used to work in behavioral health care, and they have disabilities like dyslexia and some of the others, and they don't understand what the issue is at first, and so they struggle. But once they figure that out, then everything opens up.
Right.
You can see the light bulb go off. Things start to make sense again. They start to learn differently and better, and then they start to succeed. So I suspect that you probably noticed the same thing. Once they got along that Spanish hurdle or that language hurdle, then you could see them start to excel.
Yes, absolutely.
You worked at the Department of Labor.
I did.
Which gives you a really unique perspective on being on the other side, working with a Job Corps facility that's managed by the Department of Labor.
Yes.
What did you do for the Department of Labor?
So for the Department of Labor, I started as a business and community liaison, which is sort of a marketing media position. They hired me because I was bilingual.
Okay.
And at the time, they wanted to develop recruitment materials in Spanish. So that's why I got my original job.
So you were that proficient? So I took Spanish in high school, and I wouldn't claim to know Spanish today.
I was fluent. I still consider myself to be fluent. I'm not as good as I was a long time ago, but I can still speak pretty well.
So your responsibility, though, was just making sure that you did the translations for the material.
Yes. That was my first
curriculum.
job. That was my first job.
Okay.
And then I moved into being a project manager. I was over the recruitment and placement contracts, and I worked my way up, and eventually I was a division chief of operations in the department,
and that's
in the Chicago
really
regional
big
office.
Responsibility.
It is. We had 27 contracts.
Okay. So what's your full scope? When you say that you're in that role and you have 27 contracts, what were you doing? Making sure that subcontractors were executing what the facilities or
making
what
sure that the
like?
Contractors that ran the Job Corps centers and the admissions and placement contracts were doing their job.
Okay.
And I had a staff of between 6 and 8 project managers.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That helped with that.
So you have probably, you might be one of the best people that I can speak to in defining what the future should look like. You worked on the workforce side from the Department of Labor. Now you're working on the workforce development side, Job Corps, from the contractor side. If you had to look down the road, and you have experience now, you're not 22, 25, 26, you have a history of understanding the dynamics that make up our workforce community. How would you define what should be next for us? What should we start to look at? How do we continue to evolve workforce development? How do we continue to make sure that our young people that are so the newest generation in 2025 is called the beta generation.
I heard that. I just heard that.
Right.
Yes.
How do we make sure that as they start to be born, first of all, but get to high school and beyond, what do we need to do now to get ready for that generation?
So I think we need to shift the program.
Okay.
And I think that we need to continue to offer the program as is with the residential component,
Right.
offering that plus GED or high school diploma and a trade. I think that that will always be something that's needed,
Right.
but perhaps not to the extent that we've always done.
Okay.
I think that the program could be more flexible than it is and perhaps offer for students to enroll and train on their own schedule, maybe 3 days a week,
Sure.
or maybe mornings or afternoons if they have to work or they
Gotcha.
have children. I also think that looking at the way that we deliver our programming is important. I think that, as I said earlier and you agreed with, we haven't kept up with the times.
Right.
And I think we miss out because the youth of today are very different from how we learned in school. And if we don't have opportunities for them to learn the way that is beneficial for them,
Right.
then they're not going to find it interesting and they're not going to be interested in the program.
Right.
I also think that partnerships are important.
Sure.
I think that if we partner with employers that need employees, that will also help us maybe go in whatever direction, depending on where the Job Corps centers are.
Right.
Employees are needed.
And I look at this all the time. So Job Corps was created decades ago.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the facilities were probably built decades ago
Mm-hmm.
as well. And what's intriguing when I look at the iPhone, for what it's worth, came out not that long ago. Now, my daughter would tell you
Mm-hmm. True.
that it's been around for at least a few hundred years.
Yes.
But it hasn't been very long. The iPhone
Has
came out in
not.
2007.
Right.
And then from there, it's evolved a lot. You have apps. You can process banking
Yes.
on your phone,
Yes.
which was unheard of. This is George Jetson kind of
Right.
items,
We used to write checks.
We used to write checks, and now they don't exist, at least for my daughter. How do we make sure that we adjust? Because in your schools as well, such as my daughter's, they didn't give her books in high school. They got rid of all the lockers.
Correct.
I had a locker. I had a big backpack that was super heavy. Now they have Chromebooks.
Right.
And it seems like, as a part of this transition, we need to adjust our mindset relative to the new technology that's coming out, because it's changed not just the work environment, but it's changed how we learn. The ability to find nearly anything you need on the internet
Yes.
is a game changer. I used to have Encyclopedia Britannica growing
Yes,
up. You know, and
absolutely.
World Book was my neighbor.
World Book.
And then I had to go find that information. And by the time it was printed, it was a few
Yes.
years old.
Yes.
Today, it's so current, where you can find around the globe almost any information.
Definitely. I think that also the higher level people in a Department of Labor could take information from the contractors, the people on the Job Corps centers,
Sure.
more than they have in the recent past. A lot of us that used to work for the Department of Labor have left, have retired,
Right.
have moved on to other jobs, and some of us left just so that we could maybe be more in the day-to-day and working with the students. When you work at the Department of Labor, you don't have that day-to-day contact with the students, and the reward is not as great,
Right. I
right,
agree.
as it is when you're more in it with them day to day.
It's fascinating, because I spoke to an educator who is the same. This educator worked in the private sector and then became an educator afterwards. And a lot of educators move from the classroom pretty quickly into administration. One, my opinion, what I hear is it pays a little bit more, but they lose that connection. And from what I hear from teachers that are in the classroom, they lose touch with what's happening with the
Yes.
students, the
Yes.
challenges that the students face, the technology that's being used, the increased demands on teachers to do a lot. A lot of times they're therapists and counselors and educators and coaches and career coaches, and they're managing all these different technology systems. So I appreciate what you just mentioned, the idea that sometimes I think whether it's Department of Labor or any of the other groups, they need to get out and see who the end client is.
Yes.
And continue to remain sharp on what those needs are, and ask the question, are we meeting the needs of the person that we intend to meet the needs of?
Exactly. And there's a few of us that are still left
Yes.
that have done all of these jobs.
Yeah.
We've worked for the Department of Labor. We've worked on a Job Corps center. We've also worked for corporate offices.
Right.
And I think the view that we have is very different because we can see it from all sides.
Right.
And I think sometimes when time passes and people leave, you lose the historical knowledge.
You do.
And because that happens, it's not necessarily anybody's fault. It just happens and nobody really knows.
Now, I was thinking of this the other day. Now that I've gotten older, my daughter is growing up. She's a young adult. I don't think I value this as much, but when you hear the stories about families sitting at a campfire in the old days or sitting at the dining room table and the parents and grandparents just talking, the kids are learning and they don't know it. You're conveying that information, and I think it's the same. Once you lose that knowledge without it being passed on, so at least whether you continue with a different plan or not, at least you have the knowledge and understanding of what took place before. And it sounds like we're starting to lose a lot of that knowledge, that institutional knowledge.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you had to lay out kind of a game plan, 2, 3, or 5 things that you would point out as good next steps, as I mentioned, to make sure we're ready for the beta generation, do you have any ideas about workforce development?
So I think in terms of workforce development, having sort of a smorgasbord of opportunities. I think that the younger generations like to have choices and options. They grew up with the internet. They have that at their disposal. At any moment, they can Google something and it's right there.
It is.
And so allowing them to have several options instead of streamlining everything and maybe pushing them in one direction.
So give them a few tracks. I like what you mentioned earlier about the flexibility.
Yeah, and I think we need to start earlier talking to them about those things.
Right.
I don't necessarily maybe think it's elementary school, but perhaps middle school or early high school that you're starting to talk to them about, what direction do you want to take and kind of move them in that direction. Right. In terms of, looking at the Job Corps program specifically, I think a few adjustments would be enough. Okay. Allowing flexible scheduling, changing some of the behavior rules around. I will say, and I think my coworkers would agree with me, if you can give me 45 days to work with someone coming in the door, I can get their behavior in pretty good shape. A lot of our students in Job Corps come from the inner city, and they just come from no structure. And, a lot of times because our rules are so hard, they're in and out. Right. And we don't have an opportunity to work with them. But if we sort of had more relaxed rules at the beginning, and then as they move through the program, maybe implemented some harder rules, we might not lose as many, and then they would be able to benefit from the program. And ultimately, that's what we want, is for them to be successful and take jobs and
build a life
and take care of us. Right.
Well, that is true. My daughter needs to make sure that Social Security works because I'm getting closer by the day.
Me too.
Well, Laura, I appreciate all that you've done in your career to try to provide opportunities for people. And I think it's something completely necessary, and not a lot of people seem to know what Job Corps specifically is or what that element in the Department of Labor is, and I appreciate your dedication to that segment.
Thank you.
Appreciate you joining me on the program.
All right, thanks.
Thanks for joining us on today's program.
Thank you for listening to the I Build America podcast. Please subscribe, share, and comment, and be sure to join us next time for more insights and inspiring conversations on building a powerful American workforce. I Build America, building workforce success one podcast at a time.